Okay, so like today I'm going to focus on a relatively innocent person who just happens to be in the Rothschild dynasty, and that person's name is Nathaniel Rothschild. He was born in 1936, Director ID 900438001, and as I found out yesterday, he's got 3 different director numbers, and the one that I opened late yesterday afternoon and crashed my computer in a very, very alarming way was quite an innocent looking. It's related to one of the companies that they have that uses the windmill in his title. Let me just run through some of the companies that this man is responsible for, let me give his fuller name. Is Lord Nathaniel Charles Jacob Rothschild. He's registered at 14 St James's Place, London, United Kingdom, and his year of birth was 1936. So how old does that make him? He's a bit of a veteran now, and you can see that he's still active. If you look at those images that I'm showing on my computers, you can see that his activity spans right up into the noughties and to the present day. So he's beyond retirement age, and I believe that he gets more than the state pension. Let me just read out the corporations that he has. Some of them we've talked about before in a context of geopolitical or UK or Murdoch associated geopolitical crimes and contracts that are generated just because of the elite nature of the people that tender for those contracts. So we've got SJP Trust Corporation Limited, Lower Blackgrove Farm Limited, Wadston Nominees Limited, J. Rothschilds Investments Limited, the J. Rothschild Name Company, J. Rothschild and Company Limited, Portland Capital LLP, SJPC Corporate Investments Limited, St James's Place International Assurance Group Limited, St James's Place Wealth Management Group Limited, St James's Place UK PLC, St James's Place 1990 Limited, Crocus.co.uk Limited. We'll come back to that one later. I believe it's related to the tulips from Amsterdam financial services fraud. St James's Place Investments PLC, St James's Place Partnership Limited, Colfax, we'll come back to that. That's wallpaper, relatively innocent. iCarsan Limited, Taub Hodson StoneX Partners UK Limited. This one is not innocent. This one, I'm going to flash it up on both computers at the same time, is something that I've already revealed, which is a heinous crime actually. This is the running of the Future of Russia Foundation out of St James's Place in London. That's the Future of Russia Foundation. Do you remember those discussions that I had with Gordon Bowden about them, John?
Yeah, do you know Tavistock is in St James's Square?
Ah, and you know that Stalin was trained in London?
Yeah.
And that the diversion of the Sydney Street siege was in...
They're all Tavistock trained.
Okay. So,
even Hitler.
Yeah, and what I want to reveal again, which I think is sensational, is that Peace Prize winner Henry Kissinger was on the board of this company for some years. That's the world's biggest killer, who's been involved since the Golden Triangle Wars.
Who else got the Peace Prize, George? Barry Soetoro, aka Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, I can believe it, because those are just political plants who are chosen by the moneylenders to represent their country and to defraud their country of everything that should rightly be in the treasury and fund public initiatives.
He's hiding out in China, isn't he?
It's a master plan. So we've talked about the Future of Russia Foundation before. We've talked about British Sky Broadcasting Group PLC and the Rothschilds' links to that. We've talked about Prince Charles's Charitable Foundation, the Institute for Jewish Policy and Research, and the Hermitage Development Trust. The Hermitage is a massive museum in Moscow where President Putin is no longer a friend of these mafia families. And on the image I've got on my main computer here, You can see the mafia families are tenanted now by the Murdoch family, Rebecca Brooks. We've got a picture of Nick Clegg, Cameron and Rupert Murdoch, and we've got a picture of Prince Charles smiling broadly as he looks up at an icon of that six-fingered candlestick thing above him. Yeah. Yeah. And then we've got at the other side of the page the links to NATO and the chain of the command, General Sir Mike Jackson and other celebrities who are overlapping directors. And you've got images of El Fayed and the Mike Jackson joke, which was the joke about Michael Jackson, the pop singer, being an obfuscation tool as General Sir Mike Jackson brutalised Iraq and then the Balkans, and had little tiffs with America about how that war should be conducted. None of the British or American leaders were indicted for war crimes. All of the locals pay the ultimate expense. Okay, let's get back to yesterday's research. So we've talked about the bigger companies that they run, and let me just continue through that list before we start on anything else. So we've done the Future of Russia, Renshaw Bay UK Limited, Timeload Holdings Limited, Bider Trust Limited, the Prince of Wales's Charitable Foundation, the Rothschild Foundation, Gilbert Trust for the Arts. We'll come back to that because that man's name is not actually Gilbert. The man who left all of the loot to the nation, he has a different name. Rothschild Waddesdon Limited, the Institute for Jewish Policy Research, Jacob Rothschild and Partners Limited, CA Participation Ventures Limited, Five Arrows Limited. You understand that bit?
Yeah.
The five brothers who left the home in Frankfurt. Yeah.
Arrows, yeah.
This is the name of the pub that my local rugby club at Aylesbury, the people that I used to play with and that were my coaches and all my bosses there, they always drank at the Five Arrows. And they're decent people and they still talk to me in emails.
George, can you just mention something that I found really just incredible? Where you were born, mate?
No, not in this one, John. We need to keep this to...
Sorry, okay, forget it.
Yeah.
Okay. No.
But I was born very near the Balfour dynasty that partitioned Palestine, and this very week I understand much more about the dynasties that partitioned Pakistan and India. That was done out of Linlithgow, and there is some extremely wealthy people and influential people who are still on these business lists. The reason that Gordon would not allow me to talk about these issues is that he knows that what I can do with these disclosures is take the involvement in the Rothschilds of running the world for centuries away from the conspiracy theory and refer the world directly to the registered director numbers and the roles in the geopolitical manipulation.
Just drop me out, George.
Yeah, well, it's okay. So let me just finish the list. And the company that got me shut down yesterday, when I discovered that Lord Nathaniel Charles Jacob Rothschilds had actually registered with this company as a director and a secretary twice, was Windmill Hill Asset Management Limited. Now, I don't know why that crashed my computer, but when I was looking at it and before I captured the images, the time span of the corporate service where he'd been a director or a secretary was registered in months rather than years and decades. And that makes you very nervous about why you would register the same company twice, once as a shelf, once as a dormant company and once as an active company, as if you might be interested in switching cash assets to different part of the world in very quick periods of time. Just the last three companies on the list are British Sky Broadcasting Group plc, Courtauld Institute of Art, Spencer House Limited, J. Rothschild Services Limited. Okay, are you there now, John?
Yeah.
Okay, let me tell you first about the Gilbert Collection Trust. That's one of the companies, you know, yesterday I'd heard a lot of these things, and remember that this is only one person in a massive family who we know are accused of being a breeding control mechanism that has allowed them to take control of all monarchies all across Europe and all across the New World as well, and the colonies and the empire upon which that sun will never set. And they are more powerful than any elected officer or any monarch in any of those regions. They now own all of the central banks. And so yesterday I was just fishing for what one individual member of the family gets up to in his mid-70s. Yeah, he should be taking a rest break now, spending a lot of time on the golf course.
Well, he needs the money, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I cannot see how they can use the money that they have actually. Yeah. So let's talk about Sir Arthur Gilbert. Arthur Gilbert was actually born Arthur Bernstein in 1913.
There you go.
Which is almost exactly 100 years from today. And you remember what happened in 1914?
Well, that was the Federal Reserve. Well, that was 13, wasn't it?
Yeah, so in 1913, this man, Arthur Bernstein, moved out of Europe, where the Germans were getting uppity, and he moved to Golders Green in North London, where his parents had... Oh no, he moved there after leaving Poland in 1893. Okay? So he was born in 1913, he did not move there at that time. Okay? On 18th December in 1934, Bernstein married Rosalind Gilbert, a talented young dress designer, and took his wife's surname to become Arthur Gilbert. Wonder why? You know, Bernstein's a famous name. Could be useful to people to keep famous names so that their business empires and their peer pressure groups could be intimidated by the power of the name. The following year they started their own evening gown business, with Rosalind as the designer and Arthur as the salesman, bookkeeper and general factotum. In 1949, it was 1939 to 1945, but in 1949, at the age of 36, Mr. Gilbert had made enough money to retire and decided to emigrate to California. Okay, now if you go to the Gilbert Collection Trust website, you'll find that it's gold and silver and treasures that are being traded there, and they are now in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And you know all about the history of Victoria and Albert. Prince Albert's chain, his incapacity as a homosexual to have children with his wife, and the Rothschilds' capacity in the form of the King of Kings, interbreeding and creating all of Queen Victoria's illegitimate children.
Well, she had 9, and then she had 1 in wedlock, which Greg Hallett exposed.
Yeah, she had that child at 14 on the Isle of Wight, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, and that child was also had German roots because he was born to blind King George of Cumbria, who was later returned to Hanover, but because of his innocence and his legitimacy, he had to be taken out. Do you remember Greg Hallett telling us all of those horror stories?
Yes.
And the dynasty of that person, which has now been published by Greg Hallett's killers, we believe, because Greg Hallett tried to take a lawsuit against the illegitimacy of the current British monarchy because of these breeding bedchamber behaviours to take control of all of Europe's elites and monarchy dynasties. That person, Greg, has been disappeared by the regime, even although the whole world knew that he was proclaiming this. His book has now been published, and both of us have written to the people that are asking innocent subscribers and customers to pay the purchase price for that. We're asking them to identify themselves because we believe that Greg
haven't replied yet.
No, they have not replied, but we know that there are 1 or 2 fraudulent Gregory Hallets that get involved in Ponzi schemes like the one I will describe at the end of this video. So the Gilbert Collection Trust looks like a series of havens. One was in Western America, North by Northwest, where they made the film.
Yep.
And that is where the Gilbert collection was for a long time before they brought it back into London and into the Victoria Albert Museum. They've got gold boxes, gold and silver, and mosaics. The pictures are nice, and I could reel off the list of directors if you want to hear some of them. One of them is particularly interesting in a fish and chip shop context. Would you like to know who that is? Yeah, you ever bought your chips at Harry Ramsden's?
I did many years ago.
Oh, well, you could be thankful to the Honourable Mrs. Olga Marie Luisa Anna Polizzo di Sorrentino. Now, when I tell you about her directorships later on, it will all become more obvious. I cannot see any other really big names that are worth mentioning on that list, although there is a Lawrence, but it does not have the word Anne in it, so it's unlikely to be Her Royal Highness Princess Anne Lawrence. We've got Professor Eric Campbell Fernie and the Right Honourable Rosamond Mary Monckton. So relatively innocent names. And the Gilbert Collection Trust, apart from where the loot was taken from and where it was laundered to, and then where it was brought back.
You know, that's an interesting name, George, because we've got Lord Monckton, haven't we?
Who is he? I don't know that name.
He's fighting this climate fraud.
No, I don't know anything about that. And can we just... Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about... You know, I saw that name, and we used to have a restaurant in my town, and it was called Sorrento's. And when I looked up the name of this woman, it also reminded me, yeah, and you told me about the Italian connection and about sinister connotations of cross keys and iconic relationships to Europe that have been going on in the...
Where our friend Catherine Ashton attended.
Ah, good lad.
The only person to score E.
Well, I was quite stunned that, you know, in Galashiels, which is Michael Moore, that's not necessarily Michael E. Moore, with vast interests in shipping scams and infrastructure scams and global delivery scams registered in Dubai that we talked about earlier. But this woman, Sorrento, does business with companies like Instant Companies Limited, Swift Incorporations Limited. And then when I read that she does business with Sir Rocco Forti, and I thought back to when I was a child in the Borders, and the Forti people were the people that used to sell us ice creams.
Well, I used to work for Forti.
Yeah, and then when I find...
She ran, Mrs. G, she ran the toffee apple and candy floss business in Battersea Park Funfair under the Fortis concession.
Okay, well, they're in the Nathaniel Rothschilds network.
Yeah.
Relatively minor players, but their companies are household names. Venice Hotel Limited, Rocco Forti and Family Italy Limited, Rocco Forti and Family Belgium Limited, Rocco Forti and Family Limited, Travelodge Hotels Limited, Landau Forti Charitable Trust, Hotel Trisanton Limited, Sir Rocco Forti Limited, RF Hotels Limited. Now, none of those are crimes, but then when I found that an overlapping director in this woman's thrall was Maurice Gammell. You remember the name Gammell? And all of the cairn frauds that we've been hearing about?
Yeah.
And it turns out that he also has interest. Now, I don't know whether or not this is the same Gammell family, or it's just a freakish coincidence, but they are also in the Italian chip shop empire sector. Okay, and the Ramsdens is run by a Gammell. Harry Ramsden's Restaurant Limited, Seahawk Limited, Wellborn Developments Limited, Thames Valley Restaurants Limited, Wellborn Ross Limited, Willoughby 66 Limited, as if that might be a Ponzi shelf with a Freemasonic affiliation. Yeah, it is just stunning. And when you learn how to use Director Check, if you want to be a career-long researcher on how the fraudulent owners of the world work to dismember the world, to sequester all of its wealth and all of its central banks using companies called Instant Companies Limited and Swift Incorporations Limited. Yeah, it's just the listings of the directorships that interlock with Olga Marie Louise Anna Polizzi do Serentino would take me 3 hours to get through. And this is just me looking at one of the Rothschild dynasty and one or two of the, the quirky little company names that they've chosen so that they can trade using the fraudulent laundering tools. And wait until I get down to the tulips from Amsterdam joke. Now, Colfax is a name that I've never heard of before, and yesterday when I was dedicating time to this, it's quite interesting to browse through the lists. There's nobody of great significance on the Colfax listing except a name that I've associated with the crashing of the Irish economy before. Are you learning now who that is?
Go on.
Sir Martin Stewart Sorrell.
Yep.
Used by Colfax Group Limited, which sells wallpaper, between 1997 and 2013, when he began to come under scrutiny from innocent fraud researchers who do not get a salary, and when he appears on Squawk Box in the morning, he is riddled with sweat because he knows that the game is nearly up, but he's linked to European elites like the other Rothschilds directors are. Okay, he's got current or dissolved companies 21, and he's resigned from 137 of 158 companies he's been involved in. He's involved in the Olympic commissioning, the Football World Cup commissioning with Nick Clegg and Princess Anne, but they've both taken their names off the list. And Gordon Bowden has explained how easy that is to do if you're high up the power base and you need to hide your shame really quickly. Okay, so that's if you get your wallpaper at Colfax, then just know why it's so expensive. And it's, I believe, you remember, did you ever play Monopoly?
Yeah.
You remember what was the most expensive place to buy real estate?
It was Park Lane, wasn't it?
I think it was Mayfair, was it not?
Yeah, Mayfair.
Well, that's where the Colfax Group, led by Martin Sorrell and Lord Nathan Charles Jacob Rothschild. Nothing sinister in that. I just wanted you to know their connections. And they were run by people like Colfax and Fowler, which is a really common name, and if you watch the Chicken Run movie you might see the significance of the name Fowler. Everything that they do and everything that they steal, they laugh at it. Right then, let me go to the next topic, because this one sort of stunned me. Now, you know how I'm drawn when you see, I told you about all the issues that are going on in Gaza and how there are so many British activists and so many American activists that work their whole lives as either volunteers or fundraisers for Gaza. And when I revealed for you that what was the name of the bank that I mentioned this morning?
Hambra, was it?
No, the Israeli bank. There are two of them, and what they're doing is they're registering their companies in London, and this is a shareholding company. It's run by two massive Israeli banks, and it's there tucking away the profits from the brutalisation of an innocent Palestinian neighbour that has been taken over just to keep the people of the world chattering about things that they see as massive issues for freedom of the people, so that the people who are in financial services can share jokes without even the vaguest risk of disclosure, which took me to Yad Hanadiv, registered address 15 St James's Place, London. This is on the Rothschild man's listing.
Well, we had the Tavistock.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and you know that is about training of world leaders for every country that we manipulate.
They've all been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nathaniel Rothschild, Honourable Nathaniel Philip oh no, this is a different one. So one of the relatives is on the board of this since 2009, and his name is Nathaniel Philip Victor James Rothschild. But the man that we were talking about at the beginning is also on the list. And when I looked at Yad Hanadiv, it becomes quite obvious that it is vitally important to the nascent nation of Israel, because it's a funding mechanism. And this organisation, Yad Hanadiv, was instrumental in a building called the Knesset. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
You know where the Knesset is?
It's in Israel.
It's in Israel, and it's where the prime ministers, who end up in security companies like Ergo, in league with people who used to be heads of MI6 like Sir Richard Dearlove, but the poor ones who have to live in the desert are the Peron family. Knesset has been the residence for Prime Minister Peron for decades. And what I've revealed on my website is that if you look at the relatives of Prime Minister Peron, they live either in Latin America, where the loot was laundered to, or they live in Spain.
Interestingly enough, George, you know who played Eva Peron, don't you?
Madonna.
Yeah, Illuminati puppet, Madonna.
Yeah, she's been trained in the, I forget what they call the institution for the manipulation of pop stars in America. She's been trained, but Britney Spears dropped out. And you know, I've tried to get Madonna's contact addresses because she's got massive estates in Scotland, and she's a master at manipulating people's minds. If you see the video clips that she makes, and you see the following from her followers, she can get them rabid. And the videos she makes now are all about pointing guns at black people's heads and things. And all of that might be vaguely offensive if somebody did it in the streets of Scotland, but because she's in league with Bush and Stephen Harper, both of which have been inducted into the Lubavitcher movement, which Jim Fetzer had never heard of last week, and I will tell you soon sensational things about Yav Hanadiv. Okay, the man who caught my eye in the Yav Hanadiv Wikipedia page yesterday was not actually a member or a director at the Rothschilds boards, but he was actually the boss at the World Bank. And you might remember his name, because his name is strikingly familiar to all British people. I leaked it to you at the end of the first video we made this morning. Can you remember what name was so familiar in a sporting context to this magnate in the banking sector who claimed to be a socialist and has close affiliations with a man called Tam Daliel, which is also not his real name. The man's name that is affiliated to Yad Hanadiv and is a prize-winning economics leader is Michael Bruno. Can you think of a Briton that might have appeared in the news when that man became the head of the World Bank?
Oh mate, Frank.
Yeah, Frank, you know, the thinker and the deep man who's on rehab himself now because he got so many blows to the head. Yeah, he's pictured on my website, pictures that were crashed when my computer was taken down yesterday afternoon with Henry Cooper and world greats. And you know how much the New World Order have used boxing to inspire people. And when Muhammad Ali refused to take the draft and go to Vietnam when Kissinger asked him to, he was sent to jail. That's a black man who was unprepared to fight against people he had never met for a cause that he did not understand, and was imposed on him by President Nixon, who was a multinational killer and killed the returning troops in those things that we've described in recent videos using Lucky Luciano, the American Teamsters, and killing French and Italian loyalists who were stripped of their weapons, sent back home to be culled as part of the anti-communist movement, which is why this man, Michael Bruno, sees himself as a socialist, and he gets support from Labour MP, now Baron, Tam Dalyell. That was the bit that shut your voice track down in the first interview we made this morning. None of the exposures on war criminals like Zahawi, but when I mentioned Tam Dalyell, who's been an icon in Scottish politics for decades. Yeah, there's pictures of him in the things that I will eventually publish with this video. So the Yad Hanadiv board contains Mikhail Braille-Wheel, Beatrice Juliet Ruth Rothschild, Sir Ronald Murad Cohen, and the Honourable Nathan Philip Victor James Rothschild. So can you see how it worked? They build the Senate, they build the memorial gardens, they actually plant people in universities all over the world to become heads of the World Bank eventually over time, and the Israeli Central Bank really quickly when you graduate either from the Massachusetts Institute for Technology, Harvard University, the University of Stockholm, and the London School of Economics, all of which were attended by Michael Bruno, the financial expert, not the boxer. Okay? And you can see that the peer pressure is very important to that person rising to power. He was appointed governor of the Bank of Israel when Labour's, in block capitals, Shimon Peres was Prime Minister. That's the man with relatives in Latin America in the art treasure sector. It's all over my website if you want to look it up. Shimon Peres. I forget the name of the net.
Your website again, please, George.
Prof George Lee's /Revelations. No, sorry. Prof George Lee's Revelations, all one word. /home, and it's on Google sites. https://sites.google.com/site/Prof George Lee's Revelations /home. Okay, and if you look down the front page, you'll find the Future of Russia Foundation, you'll find the B Sky B Frauds, the Prince of Wales Charitable Foundation, the Hermitage Trust, and the Institute for Jewish Policy Research. So yesterday I'm just interested in one family member of the amazingly complex Rothschild dynasty, and I do recommend that any newcomer to this area of insight should watch the movie The House of Rothschild. It was made way back in the 1930s, but every time they get an opportunity to cheat the central bank, to cheat the taxpayer or the taxman, to defraud their investors, to crash the stock market, it's all explained in that ancient film. I forget the name.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing for free. Darryl Zanuck. Then when you see who's the idiot with the double-barreled name that plays Ali G?
Cohen, someone.
Baron Cohen, yeah. His dad's a professor in his brother is a professor on my email list. I will not tell you his full name or what sector he works in, but he's a leading academic in one of Britain's leading, it's either Oxford or Cambridge. Okay, when Ali G sings those really funny songs or interviews David Beckham, you now understand what they're laughing at.
Sir David Beckham.
When he sings the song Where's Me Julie, that's about what is portrayed in the film The House of Rothschild. The first of the Rothschilds to marry into the, the breeding dynasties. And it is all the people that are named in that film appear on the listings now. There's still the same elites that were running Europe then and were brutalising Europe in 1914 that are running the world today. But today we now have global education, global communication, And you lot that are listening to this video now have access to the director numbers, to the genocidal funders of all of the campaigns. The Rothschilds opted for the Jewish religion in Eastern Europe near Ukraine, yet near the Black Sea, which is where they emanated from. They might have been called the Bears at that time. If you want to understand all of the research on the history, then you can look up Andrew Carrington Hitchcock's research. It's incredibly
he has a 4-hour video on YouTube that is absolutely fantastic.
And he's a Facebook friend of mine, and he has led to me understanding the history of this. But now that I understand how the fraud works in a modern day context, and how you can get, until they crash your computer or shut down the URL that you use as evidence when you make an explicit post on Facebook, which happened to us, both of us, this weekend.
Yep.
Temporarily we lost access to Company Check. That's why let me move on to the frauds that this member of the Rothschild family perpetrates. So, and you look up Tam Dalyell and see how close to Israel he is, like the man who was passing the Clutha pub, Jim Murphy. The Labour Party and the Conservative Party and the Lib Dems are all friends of Israel. Look up Friends of Israel on Wikipedia and see that it does not matter which political party you're in. You are in it for the money, and you are in it to steal from your treasury using the techniques that Gordon Bowden and I have revealed in recent months. And you've been so supportive in understanding that as a simple but poor man. That's all that needs to happen. Let me go down to the next issue. So they built the Knesset, they built the memorial gardens for all of the war dead. The man that has to live in the desert gets it relatively tough. The rest of them have massive mansions all over Europe and the Americas. You get the picture? Yeah.
Not so much of the simple.
and the massive mansions become the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD in Paris, very close to where Mrs. Simpson and the abdicated king worked in league with same people, same cause. They had to apologise for going to war twice in the man who was the imbecile that made the king's speech. He had to apologise for his stammer, but also for going twice to war on family issues in his own lifetime. And then they make an Oscar-winning movie about it, like they did with Schindler's List. It is absolutely ruthless. Let me carry on with the jokes that they share and they think they're immune from. So I discovered a company called Crocus. Do you know the history of the tulips from Amsterdam fraud?
No.
Well, in Amsterdam they thought of a Ponzi scheme, which was that if we can convince the world that they buy shares in selling our most prominent national product, which is plants and flowers, it's the tulip from Amsterdam joke. And you're not aware of how they pumped and dumped the tulip? They kept issuing shares in the tulip industry, and people were told, like you're told when you enter the national lottery, which is just a massive fraud. They pick the winners, they take the money from the poor people because they have no other access to money or to getting pay rises because they're mistreated by all of these bastards. Sorry, that should be batards. I do not want to lose my temper. Let me talk about Crocus Co.'s directors.
Let me just say that that's the royal name that they use, batards.
Yeah, Greg Hallett explained that, like the unlawful killing concept, which is murder within the family. And when you get the head of the Met Police to look into the inquest and declares it to be an accident, it's only the French across the channel who have the gall to say that that is an unlawful killing by this person's family. And let me read off the list of directors on Crocus in London. It's a gardening company. Mark William Fain, Peter Clay. You remember Cassius Clay? Yeah. Remember the Muhammad Ali jokes? Yeah. Muhammad Ali was a member of, or a trader with the East India Company and a friend of Lord Liverpool. and that's why McCartney, Lord McCartney of Liverpool, and Jaagir, which is a posh name or a jocular name for one of the nabobs that were in league with the East India Company. The whole thing is a vicious joke, and you know the Rolling Stone joke is a laugh at the religious fraud. That's Jesus resurrecting himself by rolling the stone away. And when they make the movie about the defoliation programs in Vietnam as the cover for the Rolling Stones launch, then you see how cynical and ruthless these lot are. Yeah, so the directors on this lot are relatively innocent, but you get down, so I've gone Peter Robert Clay, as if that might be the same person with a different middle initial like your mate Katie Bourne. Remember that? Or was it the police commissioner that did that?
Police Commissioner Katie Bourne. She's listed twice on that.
Yeah, so Katie Bourne's got 4 listings. She's a Mrs. and a Miss in 2 different companies at different ends of the Icknield Way, which is a historic joke that they all laugh about, and we explained it in a video last week. But I'll let me quickly run through the directors at Crocus. We've got Lord Nathaniel Charles Jacob Rothschild, just once, Daniel Noel Conahan, Mr. Frank Patrick Sweeney, Mr. Peter John Fane, Mr. Peter John Fane twice. So you know what he does. He's both a director and a secretary, so that he can do the laundering swap on a very, very brief period of time. And then you get the companies Oval Nominees Limited, Oval Secretaries Limited, Oval Secretaries Limited again. You know what they're doing? They are registered on the calendar of this, which runs from 1998 to 2012 as a very thin blue line.
Yeah.
The policing joke, which is actually a joke about the asset stripping of the funding of local police in Britain, because they're laundering the money for public sector initiatives and public sector pay rises out of the country using laundering tools like Oval Nominees Limited and Oval Secretaries.
Do you know, it's amazing how the police are protecting the people that are handing their jobs over to G4.
Well, they don't understand the complexity of the crimes, which is why I need to make it really simple.
Yeah.
This will be posted on my website. The period of service is less than a month in 1999. Okay? You remember how they had the world in fear at that time that the whole of the computer empire was going to crash when we passed the year 2000?
Yeah.
That allows them, as we panic, to tuck away trillions of dollars a day instead of just the billions that they had been taking in the late 90s. Okay, you get the picture.
They need the money, don't they, George?
Let me now tell you a little bit more about Oval Nominees and Oval Secretaries. Oh, it's my computer. Oh, here we go. Crocus looks innocent, just a gardening company, but it morphs into directors and shelves at Oval Sex and Directors. 800, but I have not yet looked below the top tier. Oval Nominees 918 377 347. Registered address 2 Temple Back East. You get the irony of that?
Yeah.
2 Temple Back East, Temple Quay, Bristol. You remember Gordon used to rant about Bristol and its boiler rooms?
Yeah.
United Kingdom, BS1 6EG. Year of birth unknown, because this is a Ponzi scheme. It's not a person, it's a series of thousands of shelves if you look beyond the top tier. Okay, and that is explicitly described, because I've looked at one of the shelves and it's called simply Oval open bracket 2269 close bracket limited. So that's over 2,200 Ponzi shelves, and it's likely to be much more than that, because I only got one chance to look below the top tier. Okay, when you look into Oval Secretaries, which serve for exactly the same brief period, so one of them is in the UK and one of them is in the Havens, and my links to the Oval Secretary is just one that arbitrarily I looked at. was 915-706-213. And when I look at the directors and the secretaries on that, it takes us to a registered address of 650 E. Kendall Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA, 02142. And then when you look at Oval Nominees Limited, that are used in the same week or fortnight in 1999, you've got masses of them. Just list after list after list. Oval Nominees Limited, almost all registered in the Bristol area. I've got 3 here, different director numbers: 9150-79751, 918-377-347, 918-826-189. So those are crimes. They are laundering money from Britain, using one of Britain's most famous families as the figurehead at the Oval Companies. The Oval Companies are not actually run by... Sorry, that is a false accusation. I need to withdraw that as a matter of urgency, because the Rothschilds don't run these. You've heard about how it works in Finchley Road. Barbara Cahan and the people that are relatively lowly paid work like slaves in blocks of flats or shoddy looking buildings or council houses, and they do the dirty on getting the really famous people's money into different continents. Can you see how it works? And the name of the director in East Kendall Street, Massachusetts, is Tuan Ha Ngok. I don't know his ethnicity, but that is not important to me. I just need the crimes that they are perpetrating, which are ruthless and are impacting upon all British savers, all global savers, all investors, and all people that work in the public sector, or even in the business sector, and invest in that. They are being defrauded by these world famous cheats. Let me just see what the next slide is. Oh, that's the end of it. So I think I'll stop there. And
I just hope, George, that people understand why their pensions are dry, why they're queuing up at food banks. Totally unnecessary.
The other 2 director registrations for this person are really interesting. Let me tell you about that before I sign off.
Yeah.
So what we had yesterday was that when I got to the late afternoon, I realised that the second... So what I've described up to now is on the first registered for Lord Nathaniel Charles Jacob Rothschild. When you go to company check, there were 3 different director names, and the second one is just amazing, because they're claiming ownership of an island, and my geography's too frail. I was going to look it up on Google Maps, but the company is called Butrint Limited, and Butrint is it's an island off Albania. And the directors are the man Kemp Welsh, who's got more money at the bank than anybody else I've ever seen, because he works for HSBC. And that there's
we're back to David Cameron's great.
Yeah, and we're back to the Eastern Scotland.
Yeah.
Eastern Scotland. I forget the name of it. The Eastern Scotland. There's Troughtons. You remember Doctor Who being a Troughton?
Yeah.
Butrint is... If you look that up, you'll see that it is a distant land, and it is linked to legends about the Greek gods and the Odyssey. Now, I've realised now that I've been on a 10-year Odyssey. I've been in Australasia, I've been in New Zealand, and I believe that I was put on the world to engage in that Odyssey and to get the world back to innocence and prosperity. So the Kemp Welsh name, you might have a look for it. Do you want me to reel it off so you can see how much money he's got at the bank?
I don't want to sick George, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, but can you see that Butrint Limited is registered because they're interested in manipulation of distant lands and the history of the New World ownership? It's got Douglas Holmes, it's got Atwoods, it's got the Troughtons, it's got Nathaniel Charles Jacob Lord Rothschild, it's got John Devan Lord Sainsbury of Preston. You remember the Sainsburys?
Yeah.
That used to be the science minister, and I'm mentioned in my inaugural speech in New Zealand, but was the only professor in the University of Otago never to have an iPod transcript made of what he talked about, because a lot of it was a menace to the innocent young children that go to university all over the world. Then, yesterday afternoon, when I went to Lord Nathaniel's third registration and my computer was crashed before I could save all of the slides I made, I realised that he was just redeclaring that he was a director. He was using Brighton Secretaries, which is very close to you, and is very close to me because of issues that are related to my family. Yeah, I cannot tell you any more than that at this stage.
No.
But you know, the people that are in this one are involved in the company called Windmill something. If you look back to what I talked about at the beginning, let me find on his first listings. So what I found was that the same Nathan Rothschild is involved in 3 holdings, basically 3 groups of director declarations, and the third one was also included in the first one, and I think, ooh, that's a bit iffy, isn't it? And then when I opened the website or the company check details for the third one, it was the Windmill company that I mentioned before. Dare I do it again live online? When I clicked on it yesterday and opened it, my computer crashed like really.
George, because this is too good to lose.
So if the public want to take a chance on that, let them open Lord Nathaniel Charles Jacob Rothschild's third registration on the company check page under the number 91899 1720. It's the same company, it's a different director number, but what he's in charge of there is the Windmill thing that's on his main listing with the future of Russia. Windmill Hill Asset Management Limited. But it's the only director registration I've ever seen where the time scales for, you know, we talked about the thin blue line and the instant stealing transactions and asset stripping.
Yeah.
On the time axis, instead of it being years and decades, it was months. So that means that they're in the process of asset stripping and laundering from that one, which has been registered twice by the same directors and secretaries, into the globalised ones that are on the main list, with all those links to the chip shop empires, the Italian dynasties, the links to Massachusetts and America. So you can see how simple it is to steal from the simple people if the simple people are intent only on watching Rupert Murdoch's version of the news and Sky TV's version of the World Cup. And you told me in the World Cup that there was a massive bribery fraud. Is that correct?
That's based in, we're talking about FIFA, which is based in Switzerland.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And Prince Charles's connections to Switzerland are bewildering, and that is through the Lonro connection and the Chambers man that is his special financial advisor.
In Switzerland, since 1291, we have your Templars.
So now that we've made this video and I've backed up all of my data, I may have the courage now to go back to the second registration of the Windmill Hill Asset Management Limited and see what sort of smell I get from there. It is just obscene. And when you look at my website and you scan down that front page, you can see...
Make sure you wear a gas mask.
Well, yeah, we're in a very dangerous position now, but the world just needs to know that we are actively trying to prevent the ethnic hatred that Philip Hammond is trying to engender on our TV screens, in our radio bulletins this morning.
Well,
and when
George, my TV went out 10 years ago. I never watched TV.
But you can hear the inference of what they're trying to do.
Oh, I know.
Islam, ISIL words, what they were doing with ISIS last week, till we exposed that as a series of profiteering companies with 1,300 registrations in the UK. They are fraudsters, pure and brilliant, and that man, Naheem Zahawi, is a war criminal, but his registered business address is in the House of Commons.
House of Commons. Fantastic.
I need to stop. I'm short of breath because I'm so angry at them.
I know. I can't even tell you how I feel. Let's stop this now before they drop me out again.
Okay, cheers, John. Thank you.
Yeah, you take care.